The Pætheon presents What Came Out, The Origins of the Fastbrækers, written and read by the author, Andrew Stewart Bergerson. Based on real events. Hugo and the Morning Inspection. It was the third Tuesday of the monkey, some 6 weeks before I met the Fastbrækers. The sun had barely risen in the east as Inspector Javos began conducting his usual rounds. I was late. When I first arrived in Detention, I had found temporary lodgings in a rooming house run by an older widow south of the market. 3 years later, I still had no reason to believe I would be happier elsewhere. I enjoyed strolling through the quiet streets at first light, as I used to do as a constable in the lands of Nod. I looked into the windows of the homes, both elegant and modest, and imagined the lives of the people who lived there, safe and secure in the knowledge that we were protecting them. I got lost there sometimes, in the lives of others. This morning I felt every one of my 52 years. A storm must be coming. I made it only a short way through town when I was met by the wife of the dry goods merchant. Li Tai Tai had been waiting for me. "You're making deliveries early." She repeated the familiar proverb. "Time does not wait for me, Detective Shi." Tieren often struggled to pronounce my last name. Mrs. Li liked to do things properly, so she called me Chi in her language, which means rank or order. Her husband was Li the Fence. If an item was illegal, you could purchase it at his shop, Kwai le de Jilin, the happy unicorn. His wife was his bagman, so to speak. She delivered goods all over town, the image of propriety. It reminded me, things are not always as they seem. Every festive, Mrs. Li brought a package of yan xianzhi to my landlady. Salted pork was a local specialty, and Li got it at a very good price from smugglers. I fell in love with it the moment I tried it. Of late, Mrs. Li brought a small package for me, too. But as I said, it was a Tuesday morning, and my landlady was still sleeping. The whole town was. "I wanted to make sure you got it." She handed me the package. "Before work." "You came just for me?" "Something special today." She was pleasingly plump. I imagined holding a woman like her must feel like sinking into a cushion. Her eyes were sky blue. It was the smell of her perfume, though, that really drew me in. Violets. I began to untie the ribbon she had tied tightly around the oily cloth, but she waved me off with her hand. "The smell! Bother the neighbors! Open at lunchtime." "Fish?" "3 kinds." Her hair was held together with a traditional ji. In Central Ward, hairpins were coveted items. A woman's hair was a symbol of the state of her household. I weighed the package in my hands. "That's a big meal, even for me." "The stonefish is in the round." "Aren't they poisonous?" "It hides, it waits, it strikes." "Then why the poison?" "To protect itself." "There's always a bigger fish," I quoted. "Cut out the poison, Jingtan," meaning detective. "Then the fish can do no more harm." I fumbled through my pockets. Any gift from Li the Fence could be misinterpreted as a bribe. "I have to pay you." She waved me off. "Tonight, after 11th gong." I had lived most of my life in the kingdom of the kindred, where they marked the time of day with church bells, a different number for each hour. Here in the kingdom of armor, each hour was rung in by a different gong. The scale ascended in the morning and descended in the evening. The 11th gong was a deep baritone. "I'll be sure to be here." "The inquest keeps its promises." It was a strange comment coming from her. For that matter, the whole interaction seemed curious. I didn't know how to respond. She was already walking down the alleyway, the smell of violets lingering in the air. "So long," I waved back at her. "And thanks for all the fish." I thought about Mrs. Lee as I carried the package through town. I decided on my course of action by the time I approached Shermer Jail. An open field separated the town proper from the former boarding school. It loomed before me like a castle atop a grassy hill. Shermer Jail reminded me of why I was in decision in the first place. The Northern Initiative, our crusade to pacify the vast wood. We supported 3 heavily armed outposts, protecting our settlers in that wilder land. We also supplied the expeditionary force, fighting to defend our civilization in the forgotten lands thousands of leagues further north. Seeing Shermer Jail helped me focus on the task at hand. I told the story to myself as I passed through the remnants of a low curtain wall. These fortifications were destroyed during the Battle of Jue Ding in the 5th Age. The ruins gave the entire compound a romantic feel. I imagined wave after wave of the minions of Talon crashing against the stone wall until it crumbled before them. Yet Shermer miraculously survived, thanks to the surprise arrival of a mercenary army from the Marathi Confederacy, come to save the Ring Empire. This hallowed ground. Javos was waiting for me at the foot of the broad stone stairs. Above us, a tall platform held the courts and offices of our security compound. "Dreaming again, detective?" "Good morning, Inspector," I replied, catching my breath. Javos liked it when I used his title while conducting official business, even though he was younger than I, and I considered him my friend. It was easy to mispronounce his name. He preferred Javos, neither Javot in the Andras style, nor Javosh, as his Jakari mother must have done. "No time for a fast break meal?" It was his attempt at small talk. I showed him the bundle and began the tale. "It's my lunch. A bit of a mystery, really. While I was walking this morning, who did I run into but—" Javos interrupted. "I'll save this for later." I put the package back under my arm. "Do that." It was going to be one of those inspections. Javos scrutinized my attire. In the style of the Andras, I wore leather boots, leggings with a leather belt, and a doublet cut at the waist and open on the left shoulder for my mark of caste. My doublet had ample space up front for my rich belly, but I avoided the armor that crusaders wore over it. I didn't even carry a sword. I had convinced Javos that I'd be more effective as a detective if I looked like a civilian. There was no shortage of foreigners in decision these days, as Jue Ding was called in the common tongue. The Northern Initiative attracted craftsmen and merchants from across the 5 lands and 7 seas. For his part, the young inspector wore the long cassock of a prison friar. It was purple, like all the uniforms in the Order of the Justicars. Javos also commanded the Crusaders, who were the military branch of the Holy Inquest, but his heart lay in political crimes. Either way, quite the accomplishment for a man of 28. His robes were insulated with fur for the northern climate, even though it was still the season of flowers. Javos spent most of his time inside cold buildings, a single purple wand stuck in the lilac sash around his waist. This is the tale of Hugo and the morning inspection. Every day since we arrived in Jue Ding, Javos inspected the buildings, then the people. He found both wanting. It would have been intolerable if he didn't hold himself to the same high standards. We came to decision to restore law and order on the northern frontier. On that 3rd Tuesday of the monkey, we were finally given our opportunity by none other than the wife of Lee the Fence. I was still leaning on one of the 2 statues on either side of the lower gate. Tieren called them stone lions, shi, but foreigners refer to them as foo dogs because these spirit guardians took the form of akitas. One of that breed had saved the life of a Tieren commander, so the town adopted it as their emblem. Our foo dogs had fearsome faces and were stomping the serpent of disorder. Javos ignored them and my need for rest. He turned and began walking purposefully around the outside of the large brick foundation of Schermer Jail. He had a slow but even cadence. I followed as best I could. The recent rain had trapped muddy patches in the outer ward. This strip of dirt lay between the foundation and the ruins of the curtain wall. I tried to avoid the mud by jumping from one patch of dry ground to the next. Javos walked in straight lines. He got dirty to get clean. Later he would scrub and buff his boots to a fine sheen. He held his hands behind his back. Status? 20 Fastbrækers this morning. Language detective. Apologies, Inspector. The men use the phrase so often. Officer Vicaire is the last person you should be modeling your behavior on. A decade older, Vicaire was a fellow man of the Andras, but he didn't share my interest in the social causes of criminality. He liked to mock the suspects in detention. He called them Fastbrækers because he resented having to serve them a morning meal. I amended my statement. We still had 20 suspects in detention as of last night. Criminals, Javos corrected me. Caste, gender, species. Sergeant Kopenik found 2 escaped slaves, 1 male, 1 female. The commoners were arrested for smuggling, gambling, loitering, or possession with intent to sell. Misdemeanors. Sadly, some were recidivists, I added. The smugglers, describe them. Javos preferred to hear the full report verbally, even though I wrote it all down for him already. He liked to keep his mind free, to absorb every detail. He usually began with the more serious infractions. Members of the Alanis clan, Ipek and Nuri are their gang names, but they're Tieren. They had 3 flunkies with them, all local thugs, and 4 working girls from who knows where. The construction of the Great Trunk Road caused commerce to expand greatly in and around Decision. All that traffic gave criminals rich opportunities for smuggling, prostitution, and black markets. The Alanis clan controlled most of this illegal trade. They were a Tura crime family that had grown rich on the back of the Northern Initiative. They actively recruited Tieren to join their ranks. Tell me about the possession charges. A liang of fairy dust. Fools. And a tian of something called longu. Verified. From the Olim Islands. I have it here. Taking the tiny package out of my pocket required some fumbling with the package of fish in my other hand. I showed it to the bearded scholar on my way home. Javos scoffed. Tien Wei Guo was a member of the scholar gentry here in Dreding. He specialized in the ancient traditions of the Tieren. His curious nickname referred to the fact that he was very learned, not to the presence of any noticeable facial hair. I kept trying to arrange the packages. Apparently, Tieren believe that even a pinch of the stuff can cure all sorts of ills. What kind? I was confused until I realized that Javos was not asking about the illnesses. I handed him the package. Javos took a pinch of the black and red dust, tasted a hint of it, and spit it out. He said it's pure fire dragon, very rare. He handed it back to me. Very illegal, detective. I closed up the package of pulverized bones and put it back into my pocket. We continued around the foundation. I doubt it's real. Dragons have not been seen since the fall of the Detention. We still use the formal name for the godlike emperor of the 7th Age. Officers of the law deal with facts, not myths and legends. Javos began to walk faster. Something was agitating him. What of the interrogation? My feet began to ache. I got nothing new out of them. Did you use force? The force of reason. Javos scoffed. No one leaves the Alanis clan. I offered them protection, relocation. I'm sure they jumped at that. I recalled what the Lord Sacristan had said when I accepted my commission 3 years earlier about the possibility of redemption in all mortal beings. I wonder, Inspector, what kind of person aspires to become a beast? Why would anyone pretend to be vermin? A grotesque form is an expression of an evil spirit. Keep that in mind, Detective. I will, Inspector. We reached the stone steps again, and I was breathing heavily. I never could tell how many times Javos would circle the foundation before heading up the stairs to inspect the troops. It all depended on his mood. He was a young man with a lot on his mind. How many went up the river? A prison barge carried our convicted criminals along the Moat River from Decision to the central carceral complex. Our new facility in the capital city of Citadel was the most secure prison in all of the Ring Empire, the jewel in the crown of the inquest, and a major milestone in the Northern Initiative. The trials won't be held until next week, I replied. Next week? Javos stopped so suddenly I almost ran into him. How long has it been? I leaned against the statue of the temple guard and made circles with my feet, first one and then the other. I had heard this question before. We arrived in Shermer 44 months ago, Inspector. And 3 days. In all that time, have those Shushan ever once cleared our backlog? Javos used the caste name for Scholars of the Robe as an insult. Have the honest people of Ding ever once gone to sleep at night, secure in the knowledge that our detention cells were empty of criminals? There were Jati for everyone in the Ring Empire. The law of the Armor Kingdom, however, cast judges not as bureaucrats, but intellectuals. Thanks to passing the civil service exam, Shushan served as advisors to the other castes, whether they were merchants or artisans or clergy or nobility. The scholar gentry held status among the Tieran, second only to the king. The bearded scholar was one of those intellectuals. Javos had nothing but contempt for intellectuals. The inspector felt much closer to the Shoku caste. As far as Javos was concerned, artisans were the foundation for a healthy society. When he ordered the old storage rooms of Shermer to be converted into offices and cell blocks, he made sure that local artisans received all the work contracts. They loved him for it. We walked past a row of windows buried in the western foundation. Jan, the ironmonger, had crafted a narrow compass pattern suitable for the windows of a security compound that prevented anyone from exiting or entering. Inside the square frame was a cosmic octagram with 8 segments radiating from a central core. The offices were further protected from the elements by wooden shutters. It was already evening by the time I finished the interrogations, I reminded him. Our officers do not have the luxury of sleep. Judges do. They willfully slow down their casework, and they're too lenient. As the highest-ranking inquestor in the region, the inspector served as the prosecutor for any case involving internal security for the Empire. Javos made every minor infraction into a matter of internal security. I thought it best to quote directly from a classic text of TA jurisprudence. The Book of Documents states the matter clearly. Shushan must offer constructive feedback on the law. Don't trust everything Chin tells you. It's a local custom. It's an abuse to twist the law to their own purposes. Passive resistance. Everyone deserves a speedy trial, I conceded. Even the Alanis clan. A nice long prison sentence is what they need. I began to breathe heavily from trying to keep up with the inspector's pace, so I was glad that Javos stopped on the northern side of the compound. Javos did not waste money on shutters for criminals. I could see the current detainees through the bars of the windows. They were sleeping, their ears twitching. After 3 years, I had learned that there was no debating with Javos when he was in this mood. I spoke quietly, so the detainees could not hear. They could probably get a year for the dragon powder, 7 months for the fairy dust. Every time I put one of those rats in prison, Javos complained, 5 more come out. It's like I'm hosting a recruitment drive for the mafia. Dashu, big rats. That's what the Alanis clan were called on the street, because the blood members of the family actually resembled rodents. The wall itself caught the inspector's eye. The soil under Decision was clay, and heavy rains fell in the seasons of rebirth and harvest. The brick walls settled unevenly. The cracks bothered Javos. They threatened to undermine the foundation. He poked obsessively at the crumbling mortar with his wand. It was purple, made of birch wood, and adorned with an attractive brass handle. Had he cast a spell of binding, it would have only been a temporary fix. So he picked at them. Mortar crumbled at his touch. I was talking about the judges, Javos continued. You want to arrest our judges? They're not ours. That's the problem. The Lord Sacristan should have given me authority to judge as well as to prosecute, in courts of our own. Without the power to sentence, we're as impotent as lame midgets. At moments like this, I endeavored to be pragmatic. It would hardly clear our backlog if we put the judges behind bars. The law must apply to everyone, or what is the meaning of justice? The Duke of Decision cannot be seen ceding his power to us, no matter how much Chang'e supports the Northern Initiative. Weakness could give rise to disorder or rebellion. The Duke of Decision. Snap! When Javos was thinking, he would twist his wand behind his back, but now he struck his left hand with it out of frustration. Did something happen during your audience? I'm not one of their dogs that he can command me to come and to heal and to beg. Snap! Javos began walking again. First Minister Meng was the steward of the Duke's household and head Shushan. More complaints? About the loss of revenue for the crown from the black market. Not to mention the Duke's coffers. Then the First Minister began to harangue me about the alleged abuses of the inquest. A lack of respect for law enforcement by the Tiezhen. Maybe they should do their jobs better. What about the fugitive problem? Javos turned away from me as he walked. Apparently, local aristocrats are complaining to him. Did you realize, Inspector, how many thousands of slaves and serfs have escaped from their masters? We keep detailed records of every case. I said that the inquest would handle it. The local nobility must leave security to me. You're well within your rights to correct Meng. You're Shushan, too. Javos paused in front of the window outside his private apartment. He had taken only a single room for himself, next to his office, here on the western side of the brick foundation. Cold and damp. Both rooms had windows that opened to the west, where the gods of order reside. Javos liked to look out his office window to think, so he kept those shutters open. But the window to his private room was always closed. According to our information, Meng said, in front of his lordship, the inquest only recaptured 7% of the fugitive property in the last 3 years. He accused me of having no idea how or why those escapes were taking place, or where they are going. Those are our statistics. I reminded him of that. And what of this so-called Underland Road? Meng continued. All the fugitives hope to find it, so they can make their way north. Fugitives have nothing to do with the Northern Initiative, I insisted, even if they're heading for the Forgotten Lands. Meng made it seem as if I'm betraying the expeditionary force every time a few slaves run into the vast wood. It's not a few. Each one undermines my authority. Now I have to offer rewards for fugitives instead of catching them ourselves. It's perfectly legal to employ bounty hunters. It's a sign of weakness. Snap! The sound of birchwood on flesh made me wince. The Underland Road's a myth, I insisted. Our Justicars guard every gate and every river going in or out of this town. It's these damn Shushan, Javos insisted, telling me how to do my job. Snap! I understood the inspector's frustration. We don't have the resources to police every landed estate in Central Ward. It's not our fault if the overseers let their own manu slip away. Language, detective! The inspector didn't approve of the use of slang. In the last year or so, slaves and serfs began using the word manu as a badge of pride. Swamp eels, as if to boast about the ease with which they seemed to slip from our grasp. I was fascinated by these subtle shades in meaning, especially when they suddenly shift. It seemed a little like magic to me. Tired, I stopped at the staircase, the base of the cut-off pyramid. I do find it cumbersome to say serfs and slaves all the time. It's useful to have one word for all the servile castes. The legal term is chattel. The heels of his boots made a clicking sound on the stone when he was irritated. But chattel confuses people with sheep and cows and horses. Chattel, cattle, 2 different words. It's not hard. Click. Cattle have been escaping from their masters too, I observed. Slaves are far more valuable. Do you really believe that the scholar gentry of Jueding wants the inquest to fail? Javos turned. They want me to fail, Hugo. That was true enough. The Shushan hated the fact that the inspector commanded more actual authority and decision than the traditional aristocracy. Javos was not only a foreign barbarian, he was an upstart. He had been born in the Banye Dif, the prison of Yu, the notorious penal colony on the Isle of Truth or Consequences, in the lands of Nod. It was all so unfair. His mother had been the criminal, not him. Javos dedicated himself day and night to his own education. He studied the law, joined the Justicars, and became a prison friar. Javos was the best investigator I had ever met. He earned everything he had accomplished. It was an honor for me to work with him, to learn from him. At last he walked up the stairs. I climbed up after him. Then we just have to show them. The Duke made it very clear. Click. If I fail to close down the black market, the king will replace me with one of his own men, and the Lord Sacristan will not be able to stop him. I had to lean on the stone banister to take some weight off my feet. At the top of the wide staircase, a ceremonial stone arch blocked access to the platform. It connected to a low palisade around the edge of the court buildings. Staircases usually made me think of the ladder of Yvain, which the faithful climb with piety and good works. That morning, this truncated pyramid struck me as emblematic of our caste society. Hundreds of invisible barriers stood between low and high, far stronger than metal or stone. Javos stood that morning on the highest step, waiting at the gate, impatiently, to be let in. Sergeant Kopenik raced towards the inspector. An overly large but completely unremarkable man, Kopenik was a Brucey from one of the larger duchies in the Raptor Kingdom, famous for the discipline of its soldiers. If you met him in the morning, I always thought, you would forget him by the afternoon. I sometimes imagined that an impostor could take his place, and no one would be the wiser. Morgan, Inspector. Sergeant, your uniform. A button was undone. Kopenik rushed to fix it. And the gate. He took out his keys. Click, click. The inspector's boot heels struck the solid stone as he crossed the courtyard. Kopenik gave me a nod as we followed his lead. Long ago, there had been a garden here, for peace and contemplation, An empty yard of rammed earth replaced it when Shermer became a boarding school. The first thing that the inspector did on his arrival was to pave it over in stone. Kopenick gave his report as we walked. 20 Fastbrækers this morning, Inspector. Click. Language, Sergeant. 20 holdovers, I meant. 35 Justicars stood at attention, lined up in 5 squads of 6, with 1 sergeant each. A handful of Crusader captains and majors were also barracked with us temporarily. Major Mingtse from the outpost at Panhu was here to discuss logistics. Bandits were raiding caravans on the Great Trunk Road, slowing progress on construction. Click. Javos was taking out his frustration on the stones. We've recovered 15 escaped animals already this morning. Quite the stampede. Javos did not enjoy the pun. Slaughter them. Deliver the carcasses back to the owners. Is that wise, Inspector? We're not a zoo, Detective. We don't have the authority. Javos stopped, but he didn't turn to look. You're sending the wrong message, Detective. I didn't catch his meaning. A local judge must first approve putting down any animal detained by the police. Javos spoke dangerously. I know the law. I retreated. The other officers had overheard me contradict the inspector. Perhaps I can arrange for the judges to move quickly on this matter. See that you do, Detective. Javos greeted Major Mingtse, asking as to the status of the Crusaders at the outpost. He and I exchanged cursory nods of recognition. The military officers tended to view Justicars like me with both disdain and suspicion. Then the inspector examined each of the officers in the squads. The enthusiasm of their salute, the sharpness of their blades, the cleanliness of their wands. Javos spoke loudly so the entire company could hear. Without the inquest, there is no law and order, and without security, there can be no Northern Initiative. Yes, we have built the Great Trunk Road almost to the Three Sisters. Yes, we have manned 3 outposts to protect our road from the monsters that inhabit the vast wood. We have even begun to settle that wilder land with the hardy men and women of the Tierren. Yes, sir, the company replied on cue. But none of our efforts will matter if our brave comrades fail in their mission. The expeditionary force is led by none other than Lord Elias, the Duke of Stonemark, hero of Operation Tempest. While our comrades risk their lives for our safety in the Forgotten Lands, shall we allow criminals to rule the streets here, behind the front lines? Our officers replied with a resounding, No, sir! The vast wood is only 2 days' march from these walls, a wilder land filled with misshapen monsters. Each and every one of them is intent on destroying our civilization. You are the thin line between order and chaos, gentlemen. Never forget it. I had not yet seen the vast wood with my own eyes, or any of its legendary creatures. I almost fancied catching a glimpse of them were they not so dangerous. A parade of such monsters lined the roofs of Shermer's U-shaped court offices. Fairy, Oreki, Ogre. Their strangely human-like forms were hybrids of fauna and even flora, decorated in a bewildering array of reds and blues, oranges and yellows, greens and browns, whites and blacks. These statues stood along the terracotta tiles of the ridge like a celestial bestiary, the very image of chaos. If these ornate sculptures drew my eye to the roofs, the tiles, which sloped down gracefully in layered inclines and extended broadly into space over the edge of the walls, carried me back to the Pætheon on the wings of devas. The rooms below were the epitome of order. Solid wood posts, polished brown, supported the weight of the roofs and liberated the walls for more delicate decorations. Like a child, I played with my head and my focus, Gazing through the decorations, I lined up the intricate patterns of carved wood with the geometries in the natural world in the distance, as if the architecture revealed pure abstract forms hidden within an imperfect world. The rector's house, which dominated the northern wing of the U-shaped compound, was the most elegant example of this architectural style in the region. On its heavy wooden exterior doors, you found large brass door knockers in the shape of perfect circles. Its rooms were divided by sliding doors, giving a sense of light elegance to the mundane. The furniture was low and finely made. Everything was adorned with flowers and cranes, popular symbols of peace and longevity. Any true Shushan would have taken the rector's house for his residence, but not the young friar from the prison of Yu. I watched the inspector as he walked through one of the narrow alleyways between the buildings. Where the winged roofs nearly touched each other, they cast a shadow on Javos and the path he trod. From the back, I could just make out the outline of his form as he climbed down the damp stairwell into its foundations. There was another iron gate at the entrance to Shermer Jail, where his rooms lay. Clack! He locked himself in. I stayed up top to speak with the judges. There were 7 less auspicious buildings on the platform. They had been converted into offices and courtrooms and barracks. Javos preferred to communicate with the TA judges through his subordinates, and for his subordinates not to question his orders in public. I was still carrying the package of fish when I found him in his office an hour later. The judges promised to clear the backlog today. Javos was standing at the wall. A crack had grown in the mortar near the window. He whispered a TA proverb. When small holes are not fixed, big holes bring hardship. I said what he was thinking. The cracks threaten the integrity of the cell blocks. Of the entire compound, Javos complained. This whole town is falling apart. I'm sorry, Inspector. I spoke out of turn. What was your first clue, detective? His room was sparse. On the desk, a porcelain inkwell, a vase of quills, a block to rest them between strokes, a folded cloth to capture errant ink, a writing mat of hardened leather. Law books lined the shelves. To one side, a tall, narrow, open cabinet of shallow pigeonholes, each with their own small stack of forms. The room was lit by lanterns mounted on the brick walls. A single hurricane lantern decorated the window frame. Javos tapped it methodically, making the flame flicker. It had carried him all the way from Truth or Consequences, his sole souvenir of 21 years in the prison of Yu. Javos was still angry. You were trying to avoid a panic. I see that now. Should every Lisa start worrying that his cows will kick him? That his Xiaomaomi wants to slit his throat? Javos used the TA equivalent of John Doe and the local term for pussycat. Surely it hasn't come to that. That's what this terrorist wants. Rap, rap, rap. Javos jabbed at the window frame. I noticed that the stonefish began to smell, in spite of Mrs. Lee's careful packaging. I stuck my hands through the bars to open the shuttered window and to let in some fresh air. He's only broken fences or opened chicken coops, this animal emancipator. An emancipator, Javos corrected. He's nothing more than another Chu Yi Gui. I was referring to the duck breeder who led a peasant rebellion soon after the Restoration. It had amounted to nothing. Javos stepped back behind his desk. He removed a file thick with reports and handed it to me. Read, detective. I took the file in hand and sat in the chair. He returned to the window and stood holding his hands behind him, twisting his wand. Mostly incidents with cattle and horses, I reported, on frontier settlements. Is that why Major Mingsa is here? Read, detective. Rap, rap, rap. Javos looked west out the window. The octagonal bars divided the opening into 8 even wedges, one for each of the boughs of the living tree. Oh, I see. A raid on Erlang? That was the TA name for our first outpost. Erlang was a messenger of the gods, whose legendary Ikeda showed his master how to defeat the Chaos Monkey. A bandit shot a guard through the leg with an arrow. He's escalating. Javos put the file back in his drawer. He's only one outlaw. What he is, Javos returned to his desk, is a fanatic. You don't think he's helping slaves, do you? He emancipates animals, not humans. Animals do talk. Word of this bandit hero might spread, you know, in the flocks and the herds. It made me laugh just to say such things. Every cockatoo and filk can talk. That's not evidence of sentience. I don't think cockatoos are native to filk. And what's next? Javos thumped his desk. An army of pigs? A revolution of squirrels? I shook my head. Surely not. Javos was still incensed. Perhaps we should invite untouchables to dine with the Duchess. I'm not questioning the great ladder of being. No, but you must stop challenging me in front of the men. Javos thumped his hand down on his desk. Then he regretted his loss of control. I must break up this black market here in Dreding. I have no resources to waste on capturing stray chihuahuas. You must trust my judgment, Hugo. Of course, Javos. I'll be more discreet in the future. Javos finally sat down and looked at the package. I thought you liked the salted pork. Since when did you switch to smoked fish? It wasn't my idea. I moved the reports of the Animancipator to one side. Mrs. Lee met me at my door this morning and gave it to me. Javos asked for clarification. The wife of Lee the Fence? I put the package on the desk. Curious, don't you think? He inspected it. Why didn't you show it to me sooner? It's just fish. Javos opened the package. Smoked catfish. The fishy smell comes from the whole stonefish. And wild swamp eel. Javos poked at it with his wand. What precisely did she say? I retold the story as best as I could remember it. What do you think? It's a message. For me, I asked. Javos wiped his wand with a cloth. For me. I did wonder why she told me to take it to work. Javos sat back in his chair with that look on his face. You've already figured it out. Not entirely. Why don't you give it a shot, detective? The swamp eel is obvious. It means Manu. Correct. So Lee's message has something to do with runaway slaves. Fugitive chattel that are changing their identities. How did you get that? I thought you liked to study the meaning of words. The smoked catfish, I nodded. You're talking about catfishing, when a woman creates a false persona to seduce a rich man and steal his fortune. Javos leaned back in. I think so, but it doesn't quite fit. Fugitive slaves are not con artists. They're running away from their caste, not inventing new identities to manipulate others. What about the case of the fake Inkoi princess, who was really nothing more than a clever prostitute? She was trying to change her caste. That's a form of false identity. Javos shook his head. I'm not convinced. Why then smoke the catfish? It tastes better, I insisted. No, Javos replied. The smoke refers to a veil of some kind, a disguise. That doesn't make sense. The eels are the fugitives. Which means the catfish must represent some other party to this criminal enterprise. Enterprise? You think someone's helping the eels to slip through our fingers? Exactly. The catfishers are the ones in disguise, pretending to be someone else. Someone profiting from aiding fugitive slaves, I inferred. What about the stonefish? Lee's wife left the whole fish intact, Javos observed. Locals like to cook it that way. I reached out to touch it. Have a care. Javos pulled my hand away, protectively. The spines are toxic. Men step on them by mistake when fishing in the estuaries. That must sting. Javos looked up at me. That's it, Hugo. That's the final part of the message. I don't follow. We're the stonefish, Hugo. You and I, the inquest. Lee is warning us that these catfishers are about to help another school of eels to escape. He's calling for a sting operation to ambush them both, the fugitives and their allies. Why would he do that? I interrupted. Doesn't Lee work for Ozanich Alanis? Think it through, Hugo. It took me a moment. The Alanis clan are the catfishers. They change each night into criminals who seduce others to join their criminal organization and who make a mint in the fugitive trade. Then why would Lee the Fence give us this message? The Alanis Khan doesn't look kindly on people who rat them out. Javos gave me that smirk. Wait, that's impossible. Could Lee the Fence possibly be a Justicar? Javos sat. Deep cover. I planted him when we first got to Jueting. I felt hurt. Why didn't you tell me? To protect him and his wife. Mrs. Lee is one of ours too? Not officially, but she's a true believer, devoted to the fates. I shook my head. A pious woman pretending to be a criminal. Horrible. They have both played their roles to perfection, building trust with the family. I thought of her clear blue eyes. You were saving them for a major operation. I left it to Lee's judgment, but his message confirms it. The time has come. So, the Alanis Khan is helping slaves escape, I inferred. No doubt for a hefty fee. Ozanich himself must be directly involved. Lee would not risk his cover for less than that. Then I remembered. She told me to meet her at the 11th gong, to bring payment. She's asking for confirmation. I so much wanted to shake her hand, to tell her how much I admired her sacrifice, her courage, but I knew that I could not. What do I say? Javos paced for a moment. Then he carefully held up his index finger, working out the story word for word. Thank her for the fish. Tell her you have a special occasion. Lee needs to get hold of as much smoked catfish as he can. Only the biggest fish. But there must be eel to go along with it. No less than a decatessera will do. Then be sure to confirm when and where he can deliver. You want Lee to tell us the time and place for the sting. The fates have spoken, Hugo. After 3 long years, I can finally rid decision of these vermin. And capture a whole school of fugitive slaves, I added. Javos tapped the crack in the wall with his wand. Lee will tell us where to lie and wait. Then with one surgical sting, he jammed his wand into the wall. I shall crush them. Mortar crumbled to the ground. A stone loosened in the foundations of Shermer Jail. The Alanis clan? The Shushan! This operation will show them the kind of man I am. Then I'll be sure to convey the message to Mrs. Lee, I promised. To the restoration of order. Javos stared into my eyes. To the restoration of order. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Look for the next episode, Hugo and the Big Catch, and the novel, Detention, Book 1 of the Tales of the Fastbrækers. You can visit thepætheon.com for free maps, glossaries, and more, or support this project at ko-fi.com/thepætheon for access to Discord, hard copies, role-playing adventures, and more. Music created by Gerbob for the Pætheon LLC. The Pætheon and the Tales of the Fastbrækers are registered trademarks of the Pætheon LLC. No parts of this story or audio recording may be reproduced or transmitted on any medium for any reason without the permission of the Pætheon LLC. Hugo and the Morning Inspection. What came out August 2025. Copyright 2025, the Pætheon LLC. All rights reserved.